What's up everyone and welcome back to Popcorn Rants. And today we have another video about Star Wars. No! Relax. You'll be alright. Today we're going to go over the first half of Disney's The Skeleton Crew and we're asking the simple question, is it good? Let's go over what we've seen so far. Right off the bat, episode 1 starts off setting the scene, something the Acolyte failed to do in 10 episodes, and we're introduced to an unknown planet with what seems to be a utopian society, and immediately meet the show's 4 main characters. We have the Dreamer, the pacifist psychic, the supportive know-it-all, and the natural-born leader. It's also apparent that these kids are very self-sufficient, while their parents are off working, which leads us to believe this planet is an absolute safe haven. Now, as a side note, in the introduction it sets the timeline, and apparently it's shortly after the fall of the Empire, which is a criticism of itself that I generally have with Star Wars. There's so much time jumping in this universe, it gets so confusing. Like, I literally had no clue what timeline this was until 3 episodes in. I think we saw some X-Wings. I mean, looking back, sure, there are some hints, but if you aren't a die-hard know-it-all, it wouldn't be obvious. Now, moving to the end of the episode, the kids finally meet at what they think is their own opportunity at buried treasure, and boy, were they wrong. Turns out that treasure is a crash ship, and boom, we have our story. They are lost in space. My first impressions were good. The kids are lovable and innocent. The story is fresh and different. And I was genuinely curious on what happens next. The plot was simply laid out for us. The kids need to get home. And clearly these kids were in over their heads. They're going to be pushed to places and see things that they've never seen or dealt with. They're not only children, but a product of a sheltered planet. Could you imagine being 10 years old and sent to the moon?
Help me! Help me!
Interesting. And moving into the next few episodes, it literally followed that model. The kids end up in a pirate stop. They're bullied and taken advantage of. Oh, I forgot to mention they have a protector now. Man, I need one of those. Then enters the stranger, the guide, the mystery, the one, the only, Captain Jack Sparrow. Wait, wrong series. It's actually this guy. And the show does a decent job making you go back and forth. Is this guy good? Is he bad? Is he helping them? Is he helping himself? Could it have been done better? Yeah. I got the feeling it was leaning more towards bad, but maybe that's their plan. And if that's the case, well done. And then comes the major issue. You know that planet they live on? It's a myth planet that only exists in stories of treasure, and somehow it's impossible to locate on maps unless you have an exact coordinate. Interesting.
Can't say I remember no at.
You have my attention, Disney. So, I don't know about you guys, but when I watch any show that's an addition to an Expanse universe, the first question I ask myself is, what's the point of the show? In Clone Wars, we saw the growth of Anakin and Obi-Wan within the war and the driving factors that slowly pushed Anakin against the Jedi Order. Which, by the way, if you haven't seen this show, it's a fucking masterclass, and I highly recommend it. In Rebels, we saw how small rebel factions intertwined with each other and how eventually the Rebel Alliance would be formed. Do yourselves a favor and watch this one too. Then you have shows like The Mandalorian and Andor, which are subplots about specific characters that I never knew I needed. They follow the lead character and their experiences that shape their place in the Star Wars universe. Do they piece together a bigger story? They can, but they also don't need to. These shows weren't designed to put together holes from other content. Whether or not they will is still uncertain, but based on the huge popularity, they'll most likely push the runtime of the show until they inevitably ruin them. Well, season 3 of Mandalorian's absolute garbage, so that ship's already set sail. Then comes Ahsoka. And let me just say, Ahsoka's my second favorite character, and I was so excited for this damn show. This is more of a sequel to Rebels than it shows about Ahsoka, which was a huge disappointment. One thing is absolutely clear to me though. What Disney fails to realize is when you use big characters, they come with big expectations. Which brings me back to the main topic of Skeleton Crew. There is clearly an underlying point to this story. There's some sort of coup with this planet that clearly the second half of the season is going to take us through. So, did we need this? Was it that necessary to push this post-Empire story that the fandom clearly has a low desire for? I mean, it's not like we watched the sequels and yelled out, I feel like in Disney's mind they had the hit of The Mandalorian and were like, we figured this out. But in reality, they're 2 for fucking 6 as of right now. 30%. Who's proofreading these scripts? All of these should have been bangers except for one. Who on earth came up with the concept of Boba Fett? Boba fucking Fett. What? Did anyone actually want this? Imagine being in the pitch room. Yeah, so Boba survives. He's 50 now. On Tatooine.
Oh, hell no.
You know what? Maybe I'm being too harsh. That's only half the problem. The real problem is Kathleen Kennedy. No, I'm kidding. Half kidding. The real problem is 10 episodes. 10 episodes.
To rule them all.
So we got limited runtime to establish the 3 pillars of a good story. The setting, the plot, and the stakes. And strategically within that runtime you need to establish the relationships and character growth in each arc. What Skeleton Crew is doing well is establishing each of these items before we cross into the main Star Wars story arc. We don't know how this ties into the rest of Star Wars, but it doesn't matter. I'm just worried about getting these kids home. Everything else comes second. They're hinting at a bigger plot while not losing focus on the current story. This is something shows like Mandalorian and Andor hit especially well on, making it easier for a casual watcher to hop in and enjoy immediately. So, did we need this? No, but I'm not mad at it. It's a fun story and takes a different take on Star Wars we haven't seen in live action. So what are my final thoughts? I think whether or not you're a Star Wars fan, you should join the adventure. Unlike other content, this show requires almost no knowledge of previous Star Wars to be able to jump in and follow along. In fact, after watching the first 5 episodes of the series, this is the first time Rogue Squadron doesn't sound like a bad idea. I don't think anyone asked for a show about pilots, but if there's one thing Disney's been doing well on is non-Jedi related Star Wars material. My expectations are so low that they can actually pull it off. We've been so defeated with their big name content that shows like this have been the saving grace of Star Wars. The only thing Disney needs to do is figure out their structure, pick one main story arc on one timeline, and build on it. Jumping back and forth between eras is just confusing and counterproductive. If the post-sequel timeline is the focus, stop jumping 10-20 years apart and move forward. And be mindful about the characters you use. There are expectations. We will be more critical on a show about Luke or Rey than we are about 4 kids lost in space. Simple. And at the end of the day, that's what the story is. A journey not suitable for 4 kids, going through tests and obstacles in a space pirate format. And I'm all for it.